resists the evidence. In satellization, he who is satellized is not one who one might think. Through the orbital inscription of a spatial object, it is the planet Earth that becomes a satellite. It is the terrestrial principle of reality that becomes eccentric, hyperreal, and insignificant. Through the orbital instantiation of a system of control like peaceful coexistence, all the terrestrial microsystems are satellized and lose their autonomy. All energy, all events are absorbed by this eccentric gravitation. Everything condenses and implodes towards only the micromodel of control, the orbital satellite. As conversely, in the other biological dimension, everything converges and implodes on the molecular micromodel of the genetic code. Between the two, in this forking of the nuclear and the genetic, in the simultaneous assumption of the two fundamental codes of deterrence, every principle of meaning is absorbed, every deployment of the real is impossible. The similarity of two events in the month of July 1975 illustrated this in a striking manner. The link-up in space of the two American and Soviet supersatellites, a process of peaceful coexistence, the suppression by the Chinese of idiomatic writing and conversion to the Roman alphabet. The latter signifies the orbital installation of an abstract and modelized system of signs into whose orbit all the once unique forms of style and writing will be reabsorbed. The satellization of language, the means for the Chinese to enter the system of peaceful coexistence, which is inscribed into their heavens at precisely the same time by the link-up of the two satellites, orbital flight of the big two, neutralization and homogenization of everyone else on Earth. Yet, despite this deterrence by the orbital power, the nuclear or molecular code, events continue at ground level. Misfortunes are even more numerous, given the global process of the continuity and similarity of data. But subsequently, they no longer have any meaning. They are no longer anything but the duplex effect of simulation at the summit. The best example could only be that of the war in Vietnam, because it took place at the intersection of a maximum historical and revolutionary stake, and of the installation of this deterrent authority. What meaning did this war have, and wasn't its unfolding a means of sealing the end of history in the decisive and culminating historic event of our era? Why did this war, so hard, so long, so ferocious, vanish from one day to the next as if by magic? Why did this American defeat, the largest reversal in the history of the USA, have no internal repercussions in America? If it had really signified the failure of the planetary strategy of the United States, it would necessarily have completely disrupted its internal balance and the American political system. Nothing of the sort occurred. Something else then took place. This war, at bottom, was nothing but a crucial episode of peaceful coexistence. It marked the arrival of China to peaceful coexistence. The non-intervention of China obtained and secured after many years China's apprenticeship to global modus vivendi, the shift from a global strategy of revolution to one of shared forces and empires, the transition from a radical alternative to political alternation in a system now essentially regulated, the normalization of Peking-Washington relations. This was what was at stake in the war in Vietnam, and in this sense, the USA pulled out of Vietnam but won the war. And the war ended spontaneously when this objective was achieved. This is why it de-escalated, demobilized so easily. This same reduction of forces can be seen on the field. The war lasted as long as elements irreducibly to a healthy politics and discipline of power, even a communist one, remained unliquidated. When the last of the war had passed into the hands of regular troops in the north and escaped that of the resistance, the war could stop. It had attained its objective. The stake is thus of that of a political relay. As soon as the Vietnamese had proved they were no longer the carriers of an unpredictable subversion, one could let them take over. That theirs is a communist order is not serious in the end. It had proved itself. It could be trusted. It is even more effective than capitalism in the liquidation of salvage and erratic pre-capitalist structures. Same scenario in the Algerian War. The other aspect of this war, and of all wars today, behind the armed violence, the murderous antagonism of the adversaries, which seems a matter of life and death, which is played out as such, or else one could never send people to get themselves killed in this kind of thing. Behind this simulacrum of fighting to the death and of ruthless global stakes, the two adversaries are fundamentally in solidarity against someone else, unnamed, never spoken, whose objective outcome in war, with the equal complicity of the two adversaries, is total liquidation. Tribal, communitarian, pre-capitalist structures, every form of exchange, of language, of symbolic organization, that is what must be abolished. That is the object of murder and war itself, in its immense, spectacular death apparatus, is nothing but the medium of this process of the terrorist racialization of the social, the murder on which sociality will be founded, whatever its allegiance, communist or capitalist. Today, total complicity or division of labor between two adversaries who may even consent to enormous sacrifices for it is for the very end of reshaping and domesticating social relations. The North Vietnamese were advised to countenance a scenario for liquidating the American presence, in the course of which, of course, one must save face. This scenario, the extremely harsh bombardment of Hanoi, their untenable character, must not conceal the fact that they were nothing but a simulacrum to enable the Vietnamese to seem a countenance of compromise and for Nixon to make the Americans swallow the withdrawal of their troops. The game was already won. Nothing was objectively at stake but the verisimilitude of the final montage. The moralists of war, the holders of high wartime values, should not be too discouraged. The war is no less atrocious for only being a simulacrum. The flesh suffers just the same, and the dead and the former combatants are worth the same as in other wars. This objective is always fulfilled, just like that of the charting of territories of disciplinary sociality. What no longer exists is the adversity of the adversaries, the reality of antagonistic causes, the ideology, seriousness of war, and also the reality of victory or defeat, war being a process that triumphs well beyond these appearances.